To the Point with Michael Williams.
Our spotlight today is on autism and the wider issues of mental health as we look in on the annual West Palm Beach Walk to raise money and awareness about autism that now, according to scientists, affects 1 in every 88 children. Good morning and welcome to the Point. We're devoting the first part of our broadcast to autism and mental health today. The Centers for Disease Control say the number of cases in this country is on the rise. My guest today, Bob Wright, the co-founder with his wife of Autism Speaks. They're the grandparents of an autistic grandchild, and before that he was the chairman and CEO of NBC Universal. You've been spending the last many years waging this fight with Suzanne, your wife, and with your wider family and people beyond that. Thank you for being our guest on To the Point.
Thank you. February 25th was the 8th anniversary of the launching of Autism Speaks.
Talk about where we stand right now in the fight.
Well, we have spent already $200 million on medical and scientific research on autism, and we have assisted to get the government to spend almost $1.7 billion through the Combating Autism Act, which President Bush signed, and that was 5 years, and then 3 years of a reappropriation of that President Obama signed. So that's all NIH related, that second piece, and Health and Human Services. So we've done an awful lot there. We've identified a lot of risk factors for autism. We know a lot more about the genetics, which are similar in some respects to cancer, in the sense that we're finding a lot of mutated genes and a lot of genes, in other words, that we're not you don't see in the parents and you see in the children, and that's not an unusual situation for cancer. It will help identifying, I think, in longer term, breaking down different autisms, and hopefully that isn't too long term, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We know that the cost of autism is about $60,000 a year per family. Mm-hmm. Most of that cost in the United States is borne entirely by the family.
And a cost that's going to be on the rise when we look at these staggering numbers, 1 in 88 children.
Well, the 1 in 88 is the CDC, Center for Disease Control number, but we have a better number than that. We have an extensive study that we completed last year in May, and it was, the CDC was involved. They know all about it, and they have the numbers. In South Korea, it's much more exhaustive than the one we do here. We just do school records. The one they did school records, and then the community came forward and wanted to know what was going on, the parent community at the school district. And after that led to 2 years of exhaustive discussion, diagnosis, and so forth, that we found as many children that were not diagnosed or not in the school records, in the schools, as we did that were in the records. And the number their number is 1 in 37.
The point is the wider net that's going to be cast nationwide and globally about a problem. Look forward. You said you wanted to bring up a point about where we're headed with this.
The 1 in 39 looks like the real number. That's what we're going to see here in the United States. So we have a real America. This is America's autism epidemic, and I use that word, and sometimes people don't say it. Epidemic doesn't mean contagious disease. It means a condition that is continuing to increase in significant form, but without explanation.
Where does the battle lead here in your mind, both in terms of funding, in terms of scientific research, your hopes and your concerns as you sit here today?
Well, we need to just keep plowing through. There's so much we don't know about the brain and the brain's actions. You see this with Alzheimer's, you see it with Parkinson's, and you see it with autism. So the brain focus is very, very important. Hard, basic research. We also need a lot of service work. We need to find new ways to treat children. We need to find ways to communicate with them. That isn't necessarily drugs. It's other things. It's iPads, it's iPhones, it's things of that nature. We need to have a multi-pronged effort, but really we need a national strategy for autism. We have to pull together, and that's what we're trying to do now. We're trying to husband all the resources that are being devoted to autism to make sure we can understand the path they're on. We have to, at this juncture, we have to know we're probably at a tipping point here. It's going to take a little more to get to a point where we can start finding things that will be much more useful to the community.
Before we segue to the wider issue of mental health, Mr. Wright, talk from a grandfather's perspective. You're lucky enough that you have the resources, you and your family, and yet you have a keen concern for the people, as you said earlier in the broadcast, who do not. Without those kind of grassroots resources, this is a problem that's only going to get worse and is one that we're going to keep digging a deeper hole. What are your funding concerns and thoughts, and particular concerns for people who are struggling to find the resources they need today?
Well, we have 95 walks now in the United States. Yeah. Well over 400,000 people will walk. Today, on Sunday, there are going to be somewhere around 10,000 people here walking in this walk here in West Palm. In April 7th, we'll be in Miami. That walk will be somewhere between 20 and 25,000, and we'll be in Broward in November. And that walk is going to be somewhere around 10,000. So the point of it is we need to get the community involved to understand autism. There's a lot of issues that goes into the mental health issue. These parents need community support. It isn't always about money, but it's about understanding, and it's about developing a rhythm inside of a community. And then that's how you get the political effort to get to focus on things, whether it's charter schools or whether it's special education programs or special teachers or doctors and psychiatrists and sociologists, psychiatrists associated with school districts. All of these things have to happen in the community because this community cannot afford to deal with this just themselves.
If I may ask briefly, how are you doing as a granddad, as a grandparent? How's your grandchild doing? Well,
he's stabler than he has been. He's 11 years old. He really doesn't speak. His communications problems are very, very severe. We to this day really don't know how smart he is. We believe that he understands a great deal of what's going on. His frustration, inability to communicate to us often results in a meltdown on his part. So it's a very tough issue that my daughter and her husband have.
I would say that, and I've said this at walks last year, that you could have easily sat on the sidelines and said, we'll deal only with the major concerns of our family, but you and your wife, Suzanne, have made this a nationwide, indeed worldwide effort that you continue to commit to, and everybody in the autism community. And I might add, in point of note, I have a sister, my twin sister's son is autistic, so it's a topic near and dear to many of our hearts, and we thank you for your efforts there.
Just before we started this, I traveled around the country. I went to hospitals, I went to schools, I went to research centers, and I went to military bases. And I couldn't believe how these children were without real support. They've sort of been left out of the research effort, left out of the medical treatment area, no insurance, so that's why we did it.
Let's segue to the wider issues of mental health. Weeks ago, as we were getting ready for Walk Now for Autism Speaks, you said to me you had grave concerns about mental health as it related to the growing gun control debate after the massacre in Newtown. Talk about your concerns, where we are in your perspective, where we need to be, where we're going.
Well, simplistically, the president said it for me. He pointed out there were two priorities here. One was gun control and the other is mental health. And he said they were equal priorities. But unfortunately, he started out with the gun control, and that's been it. There's been nothing done on the other side of the mental health piece. So
you're not arguing with the gun control aspect, but you're saying that we need to do a lot more on the mental health side. We can do two things at the same time. Right. But, you know, it's been difficult. And so that is a real issue. One of the things that, Michael, I wanted to point out that it's, and you see this, everything, there is an integration that has to take place, and it's a community integration. And you see it when I call it the lost boy syndrome. Many of these horrible issues involve boys. This isn't necessarily autism at all, it's just mental health issues. And there's got to be a connection between the home, the parents, the relatives, and the school, and the doctors and treatment people, and the community groups which just generally deal with disability or not, and also with police, fire, rescue. They all have to be in on this game. And if they're not in on it, then you have situations where you get the lost boy syndrome. You know, it's like, how could he have done it? Who was caring for him? And to this day, Adam Lanza, I haven't seen any report from any doctor that said this was my patient, any therapist that said I've been working for him for years, any evidence that he was diagnosed, no evidence that the school district had any diagnosis on record, they had no treatment program for him. That can't happen. We have to get... That's the lost boy syndrome. And I want to emphasize, you raise a good point. We've segued from autism to the wider issues of mental health. We're not talking autism right now. We're talking about wider issues about mental health, where it be schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, you name it, other societal issues that are going on here. And I've had sheriffs in here say the only mental health people get are when they come into our jail, that there is nothing for them on the streets, that when we deinstitutionalized, we put people on the streets years ago. You are talking about a national strategy, creating a mental health national strategy. You're working with Congress on that. What do you want to do?
Well, we had the opportunity for Darrell Issa, the chairman of the very powerful Health Oversight and Government Reform Committee, to appear recently, and he wanted to know what's happening with Congress, where's Congress going, and we gave him a lot of examples of things that were really worthwhile, but we're not getting done and so forth, and he was very, very helpful, put a lot of focus on that. I think one of the things we're talking about right now is to look at something called medical research and enterprise zones. This would be a zone that might be starting out near a hospital that has a lot of research going on for mental issues. Let's just pick as example Baltimore with Johns Hopkins. So maybe you have a zone right around that, and inside that zone we would try to get an ability to fast track any kind of development leading to a cure in any of these mental health issues, and that would be getting FDA fast tracking, getting government regulations reduced that block it or slow it down, forcing connection with the NIH on that issue. And I think we bring in a lot of private money who would come in because they see a fast tracking go. And if one city does it or one town does it, others will want to do it.
Do you think you're getting traction on this?
Well, it's very early. It's just a good idea. It doesn't cost money from the government. It's not it's actually, it should speed up research and allow it to focus, and private money would go there. I think that's one. We also have issues right now with the Affordable Care Act because the states are choosing their health care exchanges. And half the states, over 50% of the states have chosen autism in it, and the other 50% haven't. And Florida is one that hasn't. So I've got to go to the governor on that right here. That's an important issue.
A fight that you continue to wage. A closing thought about marrying these issues that we have about violence in our society, mental health. The bottom line here, you're saying the headline is we can't turn away from these wider issues if we're going to make any headway at all.
No, we can't. We also have genetic research. We've undertaken a massive issue with a company called Beijing Genome Research. It's a very big company. They do whole genome sequencing. They're going around the world. We're a partner of theirs. We're going to be sequencing 10,000 families and people with autism. That's the largest body. We will have more people sequenced than cancer will have sequenced in a whole genome sequencing. Provides 6 billion data bits per individual. That's a real challenge. I want to make sure, though, that April 2nd is also World Autism Awareness Day, and that's a very, very big issue. That's sanctioned by the UN. We'll have all kinds of countries there. We have 40 countries that are partners with us now in autism research, awareness, and other aspects of services. And lastly, I guess I'd say that our connections now are the Light Up the Blue campaign, which we started 3 years ago. Actually, Suzanne has started. And we had 3,000 buildings lit last year. This is on April 2nd, and celebrate that. And we're on 7 continents now. We even got scientists who are in Antarctica are going blue.
Bob Wright, with your wife Suzanne, leading the way in the fight against autism and in discussing wider and separate issues on mental health. We thank you for taking a few minutes to be with us.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Coming in, up next, our roundtable looks at the politics of the sequester in Washington and Obamacare's impact on Governor Scott. Now for our roundtable with News Channel 5 political analyst and coordinator of the American Studies program at Lynn University, Dr. Robert Watson, and Brian Crowley, author of CrowleyPoliticalReport.com. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us.
Pleasure.
Well, we've got a sequester upon us, but members of Congress were told, go home. Not going to do a lot about it, at least not just yet. So we've got sequester, we've got government, the spending gap issue coming up at the end of the month. All of this to be tackled. The state of our dysfunctional politics, what do you think the highs and lows and impact and outcome will be?
Well, you know, I think on many levels this is a lose, lose, lose. Now, of course, Congress could come back in a month. They created this artificial thing called the sequester. They
$85 billion in cuts.
Of this year, and then $1.2 trillion over 10 years. They could come back in a month and fix it. But I do still think a lot of the damage has been done symbolically. How's the market going to read this? We have a very fragile economic recovery right now. How are our enemies and allies around the world going to read this? And more importantly, Congress is so unpopular right now. But what the sequester is, it's at the bottom, in the end analysis, it's a gimmick that allows them to avoid their Article I responsibility, constitutional responsibility to legislate. This just puts them even further in the doghouse with the American public.
Well, and when we're talking about doghouses, it's big enough for a lot of people, and some say the White House hasn't covered itself in glory either, Brian. So what you end up with is a dysfunctional politics, the ramifications of which we'll be feeling from Capitol Hill to the White House, but ultimately on Main Street.
You know, the president played this like a small-town mayor. You know, anytime there's budget cuts, the first thing the mayor or the county commission does is say, oh my God, we're going to have to get rid of police, fire, and parks, and get rid of lifeguards. Well, that's not true. I mean, you never hear them saying, well, we need to get rid of our executive assistants first. I mean, it was sort of silly for the president to act like the world was going to come to an end at midnight on Friday. You know, I think that the fact that the House decided that they were going to go home on Friday, there are probably a lot of folks around the country who think they ought to just go ahead and stay home.
Briefly, before we move to state politics, very briefly, Robert.
I would respectfully disagree with Brian.
Disrespectfully
Disrespectfully disagree.
We'll do that later on after the... No,
briefly.
Real quickly, you know, $40+ billion from defense, you know, from the Iron Dome funding to body armor for our men and women in uniform, the veterans benefits, over $40 billion this year in non-defense. This is research and development, it's parks, it's education.
Oh, but none of that's going to happen.
None
of that's going to happen. This thing will be fixed within a couple of weeks at the latest.
Well, we'll see.
If it takes that long.
But it speaks to our dysfunctional politics. Speaking of politics here at home, Governor Rick Scott, so he makes headlines. He says, after saying, don't like the Affordable Health Care Act, which he and many others call Obamacare, and the president said he doesn't mind that, so we'll call it Obamacare, now says, I will accept it and expand Medicaid. Talk about the ramifications for him, because there are some who are saying on the right, it is a, quote, sad day for conservatives. Big enough factor, pro or con, for his re-election next year?
Well, I think that it's a big factor because you've already got Adam Putnam, the Commissioner of Agriculture, not only taking him on personally, but sort of hinting that he might enter a primary against Rick Scott. You know, Pam Bondi,
so health care
the
reform
Attorney
still
General.
has that kind of weight.
Yeah,
with
Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, and Jeff Atwater have all weighed in that they oppose the governor's decision. Some members of the legislature have. And, you know, this is a governor who started his political campaign running a PAC opposing Obamacare. This isn't just a flip-flop. This is a gigantic flip-flop.
Yeah, I agree with Brian on this. This is what started his campaign. This was pretty much the wind in the sails of his campaign. This was his promise to the Tea Party and folks on the right, and they're feeling let down from this. What Scott tried to do, I think, in damage control, as soon as he announced this, he turned around and started blaming Obama for the sequester and hitting Obama on a number of issues to try to maybe minimize some of that damage on the far right.
Of course, some are arguing that the states, and Scott among them, Chris Christie just as well came on board with this, they look at their budget ledgers and say, we need the expansion, we need the federal help on those expanded Medicaid rolls. So that debate's ongoing. But Republicans, the legislature has to approve this. It's led by Republicans. And so far, we're not hearing a lot. Are you, Brian, on...
You know, there's been some
out of
noise
Tallahassee that they're going to support this?
There's been some noise.
Capitol Hill. They don't
there's
have a
been
hill.
some noise in Tallahassee that they're going to oppose this. I suspect ultimately Rick Scott's going to get his way on this. I think that when you have you know, a number of major governors around the state, including Chris Christie and Kasich and others, it's going to be hard to ignore all that. And are there concerns? Of course there's concerns, but I think that they know that they're going to have to move forward with this.
Is it pragmatic policy if you set aside the politics for a moment?
I do think so, because it's federal money, and you need federal money.
For expanded Medicaid
for expanded
rolls,
Medicaid.
It's making states go broke.
Sure, Medicaid for the poor. Florida has a large population of Medicaid recipients, and it's too large for us to handle by ourselves. We need the federal money. But and I think Brian's probably right. I imagine Scott will ultimately get his way, but here's the problem for him. This is going to be a bloody fight. It's going to stay in the front of the news. It's going to stay on the front page of the newspapers, and that's going to alienate his base. It's going to anger his base, rather, and this thing is not going to go away.
Back in a moment with the Crowley closer and the Watson wrap-up. Thanks, gentlemen.
Okay.
Now time for the Watson wrap-up.
Well, two area Republicans had a meteoric rise to national fame. Allen West went from nowhere to national fame. Marco Rubio's there. But we're also seeing two local Democrats. Ted Deutsch, a new member of Congress, is already a minority whip. And now Lois Frankel was named to head the effort to recruit more women to run for Congress for the Democratic Party.
Keep an eye on all of them. Brian, the Crowley closer.
Well, the Republican National Committee is having a little gathering in the next couple of weeks at the Coral Gables Biltmore, the palatial Coral Gables Biltmore. And it's going to be, some people think, an audition for potential presidential candidates in 2016. Among the folks that are going to be there, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, and Chris Christie. Another side note to that is the only person who actually has an office at the Biltmore is Jeb Bush.
And all of them will profess that they're just there but have no interest. Thanks for spending time with us on today's To The Point. Gentlemen, always a pleasure to have both of you in. And if you'd like to send us a comment about today's broadcast, go to WPTV.com and click on our political link. As always, wishing you and yours a great day and a great week.